Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. It's your host, Kaylee here, and I am tuning in with another episode in this series of honest conversations with an incredible conversation with my friend and colleague, an industry titan, no pun intended, Mary Beth Hagen, the founder of Titan Aesthetics. A company who specializes in providing a full range of resources and support for aesthetic injectors and practices across the United States. I am so inspired by the trajectory of experience, the runway of growth that Mary Beth Hagen has contributed to in our industry as being sort of a founding pioneer in our space, working really in the aesthetic field since 2005, first with Medasis, who's now Galderma, and then Allergan. She held roles in sales management, product management for Botox Cosmetic. She worked in national accounts, and she really has a wealth of experience and perspectives to guide physicians and aesthetic injectors in business and compensation plan development, staff training, and employee retention and performance management. She also founded the Learners and Legacies mentoring meeting for new and developing injectors and is also the lay representative on the Plastic Surgery Nursing Certification Board. And I loved this conversation with Mary Beth because, one, I got to get some really cool perspective from someone who's been in the industry a little bit longer than I have, 10 years longer. And I feel like I've been here forever. And also just sort of her logic and general practical perspective around aesthetic medicine and what our expectations should be running, operating, growing, building, and providing results in a thriving practice. And we talk a lot in this conversation about what is the DNA of a great injector. What do we look for? What kind of questions do we ask? And what should be the guiding principles that drive our decisions as we're hiring injectors in practices? A little bit of her perspective around really what's needed foundationally to become a great injector and what core concepts an injector needs to understand before she decides to jump into aesthetics. She really is filling that gap as a support agency for RNs, NPs, PAs, and practices to protect the integrity of medical aesthetics while helping really drive this communication gap or fill this communication gap, if you will, that we have found as the aesthetic industry has engaged in more of the corporate practice of medicine. So she has some really interesting, some controversial and some just practical, I think, just perspectives around what's happening in our industry and certainly the trajectory of where the industry is going. But I really was hopeful to share this interview with Mary Beth for you as a podcast listener to really think through what is important to you as you are growing and expanding your practice. If you're an injector who wants to have your own business, or you own a business and want to hire great injectors and keep them, she really brings some valuable insights and perspectives and obviously experience in consideration of the screenings and comp plan building and the things that she does to help set practices up and new injectors up for success in our field. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did with the talented and logically brilliant Mary Beth Hagen. Enjoy. Hi there. Welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Welcome to the show, Mary Beth Hagen. So excited to have you here.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Kaylee.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to this interview, particularly during the series that we're running about honest conversations, because I found the last conversation we were having, first of all, we realized that we have a mutual connection, Mary Punchkar, who happens to be a longtime like BF of yours, right? And she was
literally since like 1980, 90, 91.
Yeah. I mean, and I met her probably in 2005 or something like that. When I first started my career out of college at Bayer Healthcare. And she was a mentor of mine and somebody who has been instrumental in the way that I have chosen to develop myself and see myself as a leader, like in life in general, like just an amazing human. So I'm like, okay, any friend is a friend of mine. And we got to talking, and I know we've been trying to get connected together for a long time here. But I so appreciated our colorful conversation, as you would say, about the just a runway of experience that you've had in this industry and kind of our collective experiences coming up through corporate and then starting our own businesses and being female entrepreneurs. And there's so much happening right now, just this energetic buzz. And I don't know if I would call it positive or negative, but there's just things going on and so much to talk about. So I would love to just start by having you tell the listeners about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Oh, Kaylee, thank you. I always joke that currently I am a word person living in a picture world. I went to Northwestern and was a journalism major and started out in sales years ago, where Mary and I met, and literally spent much of my career early on in pharmaceutical sales and loved it, learned a lot. Mostly enjoyed learning from the physicians that I would speak with all the time. I think so many times people tend to forget sales really should be more listening than selling. And then I had the opportunity to transition over into aesthetic medicine in 2005 and was very, very lucky to be able to start working with Medasis, which is now Galderma. And I remember interviewing that first time and just having people, asking the manager that I was interviewing with and said, okay, wait a minute. So with this job, I'm going to get to help educate patients. We're going to help do marketing and introduce basically an entirely new specialty into the field of medicine. And you're going to pay me for this? I'm like, this is what I do for hobbies, for fun. So it's just truly been a true, just a gift to be able to work in aesthetic medicine for the last 20 years. And we've certainly seen it grow and change so much, but it is such an amazing space for women to be working in right now. And, certainly there's amazing men as well, like my clinical partner, Kevin Harrington. But, by and large, this is a specialty by women for women.
Yeah. And you were there just at the cusp of breakthroughs in so many areas of aesthetic medicine. And even when I think back, to the early days of pharma, that was, remember, like the Pfizer days, to be a pharma rep was the most coveted career, I mean, it was.
Well, and it's funny because I still have pictures, we still wore pantyhose and dress suits, skirts and blazers out in the field every day. And I was up in Iowa and Minnesota, in my snow boots and my suit. And, I'm sure these people, we didn't have cell phones. We knew where every single payphone was on every back road throughout, half of a state. And totally different world.
Yeah. So I'm so interested in having this conversation with you because I feel like this aesthetic space it's grown, but also exponentially in size and impact over the years. And it's rare now to find sort of, what I would say, a veteran in many ways, right? Who's like kind of been there through all of the shifts. So I want to talk a little bit with you about the evolution of aesthetics and just kind of from where you've been in the lens of Mary Beth Hagen, what are some of the biggest shifts that you've experienced in the industry from, I mean, let's take it into like chunks. Probably there's identity shifts that have happened, right, over time. Yeah.
It's okay that I say, I actually wrote a book called Preparing to be an Aesthetic Injector. And the first chapter of the book is kind of the history of aesthetic medicine here in the United States. And I'm a big believer that you have to understand where we've come from to be able to plan where you want to go. There's a meeting that we run, and our tagline is learning from the past to create the future. And I think that's very important for anybody working in the specialty now to understand. Because you think about back in like 1999, that's when the Carruthers started doing the initial clinical trials for Botox Cosmetic after Jean Carruthers, noticed that it had positive cosmetic effects on her blepharospasm and strabismus.
Insane. It's insane to think that that's how Botox started, by the way.
And, it was an eye care product.
Yeah.
It was, and we look now at, I think people sometimes they get so enamored with the beauty part of Botox Cosmetic and what it can do for lines around the face that they forget that it also has so many therapeutic purposes as well. And when you look at those indications, it really is a pretty miraculous product. But it really is what helped kind of lay the foundation for aesthetic medicine in the United States. And you ask about, kind of over the, when we first, this was a plastic surgery specialty. You had plastic surgery nurses that were maybe doing some collagen, and because the reps were coming in and saying, here's this product. And the physicians, of course, they're surgeons. They cut, they don't do needles. They look at the nurse and they say, you do needles, you take this product and learn it. And that really was where it started. And then with Botox Cosmetic, you had Jean, who was an ophthalmologist, and Alistair, who fortunately we just lost recently. And he was a dermatologist. And then, of course, you had the plastics who had always been doing this, and the facial plastics. So that kind of became that core four that we still reference as core specialists in aesthetic medicine. And so there was a little bit of a stigma of you have to be in one of these specialties to focus on aesthetic medicine and injectables particularly. Yeah. But there also was the consumer stigma that a patient had to be rich or had to be in a certain phase of life or had to have a certain social status to be able to look at having these products. And you look now where we've come, and it hasn't been that. I mean, we're really looking at less than 25 years later. We are now seeing, school teachers and, kids, young adults, and looking at prevention and looking at so many different options with injectable treatments. And, that really kind of all started with the safety and the research that was done with Botox. So,
yeah, I remember. So when I first went for Botox, I was in sales, with Bayer back then. And I had a territory, and I was in the car all the time, and I would frown. I can't even do it now, but can't even make the face. But my mom had the frown lines, and I was starting to see the indentation come. And I had a friend that knew someone, and I snuck, but went in and told nobody, not my best friend, not my husband, nobody. And I was 28. And now, can you imagine? It's just like getting a massage.
It's funny. When I first started with Medasis and was talking to one of the people that worked at Allergan, because back then it was Restylane, it was Botox, and it was the Obagi rep, and then a bunch of laser reps. And, and we all worked really closely together to be able to help educate patients and to help grow the market and look at the business behind this. But it was funny thinking about just talking to different people about their impression of Botox and whether you tell somebody or don't tell somebody. And, now I think everybody thinks everybody talks about it, but it still is very much a secret. We just had a webinar last night, and one of the injectors was from the South. She said, I know everybody thinks people talk about it all the time, but people down here still don't want other people to know.
Oh, we flaunt it in Newport Beach.
That is true. There is a little bit of a difference in the Southern California versus the rest of the country.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting when you look at the different ages, because I think there is a little bit, there may be a misperception on who does talk about it. We did some research years ago when I was the Botox product manager and looked at people who'd gotten neurotoxin treatment for the first time, and then we're looking at going back to get it again. And, we found that 50% of the people basically did some research. They talked to a friend who had gotten treated. Then they said, oh my God, you look fantastic. Give me the name of your injector. They went to that person. 30% of the people were just basically said, I had a friend, she looked great. I didn't do any research. I just wanted to look like her, went to her injector. So 80% of the people who end up in a chair are there because a friend told them. But what I found so interesting about this research was that the other 20% were all women that were 40 years of age and younger. They all had had it and were planning on getting it again. But they all said they were not going to go back to the place that they first received their treatment. And I was really shocked about that. And so as
that is shocking.
Yeah. But what we found was every one of them had found where they went, either with an online deal or a Yelp review or a Groupon or a online social media type of something. They all went. They all realized the experience was not what they were expecting. And so then they said, no, we're not going back. And so I'm like, okay, wait, you went, you got it. You want to get treated again. You're not going back to where you went the first time. How are you going to figure out where you're going to go back to get your treatment the next time? And they all said, we need to talk to someone who's had it. We're like, well, why didn't you do that the first time?
Right. Yeah.
This was what I found just fascinating. They said, being younger, we a lot of times go out in groups and it'll come up that, oh, you look really good. Oh, did you even get treated or something? Oh my God, tell me where you go. And there's always someone who will pop up and say, oh my God, you guys are too young. You don't need that. Why are you talking about that? You don't need any of that. And it shuts the conversation down. And so we don't get this. We all know that it's out there.
There's that person. I need to find them.
But it was so funny, here. I mean, we saw this in 3 different cities where we went to do research. And so it really showed us that there is still some stigma. And the 3 cities, it was Denver, it was Minneapolis, it was Atlanta. So yeah, it wasn't Southern California. But it was super interesting thinking about just the different mindsets. And, you look at, if you go in Miami, they all go in a group. They go with friends. There's that very large Latina culture. And it's wonderful because they all talk about it, but they talk about it in very specific groups. In New York, nobody talks about it. It's accepted to go get it, but you don't talk about it. And it's, in the Midwest, people still feel guilty. There's so much mom guilt out there.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating looking at, what has changed. Yeah, more and more and more people got it. They are getting treated, but there still is a stigma behind it, which is, it's quite fascinating.
It is. It's interesting. And just the regional differeres too, which makes sense because there's just microcultures, within our country as well. And then, my sister lives in Switzerland and, they have their own, the different regions within Europe. Some are way more, progressive than we are and some way behind. So interesting.
Products in Europe, Kayla.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You looked at, we think we're always so far ahead with things, but I'll tell you, in aesthetic medicine, we are not nearly as advanced, don't have nearly as many options as they do in Europe or especially in Southeast Asia.
Yeah,
so.
We're not in style either, by the way. We're kind in style as well. So let's sort of talk about these shifts and, the evolution of the industry and kind of just touching back quickly on your book to preparing to be an aesthetic injector. And certainly, you come from the behemoth of aesthetic,
Allergan and Galderma.
Allergan, Galderma. You've been there and a seasoned professional in this space. And what was through these shifts, would you say, the catalyst for you to start Titan and kind of bring us back a little bit to what that book was, why that book was written and your perspective around now the shape of our industry and who's driving growth?
That's such an interesting question because I started Titan in 2017 after having been at Allergan for about 10 years. I started, as manager. I went over to the Botox professional marketing team and then went out and started the national account team for the facial aesthetic time. And it was fascinating watching. We really still don't have any academic training for aesthetic medicine. And when you think about how fast this area of medicine is growing and how specialized it is and how much information needs to be learned, it is mind-boggling to me that none of the academic RN and PPA or even most of the physician training programs don't have a specialty opportunity to do non-surgical aesthetic medicine. So when you look at how people are being trained, it runs the gamut. And as the national account director for about 3 years, I would see, dermatology groups being acquired by private equity. I would see these big national chains look at how do we open more locations? How do we train providers to be able to provide the treatment? But then I also looked at how are they trying to make decisions on products? Was it based on cost? Was it based on outcomes? Was it based on safety? And it made me realize that if the academic training organizations aren't going to do it, somebody needed to bring at least some sort of guidance into the specialty for people who wanted to transition into medical aesthetics. And, there are some, it seems like everybody and their brother is doing a hands-on training program. And I tell nurses all the time, would you ever just go in and take a weekend course in putting in a Foley catheter and then not do it for 6 months and then tell somebody you're trained and you're certified and have them get a job where that's all you do all day long? And I'm like, this is, an internist does not practice medicine for 15 years as an internist and then just start sending resumes out to plastic surgery offices saying, hey, I'm really passionate about plastic surgery. Will you please hire me, pay me what I made before, and train me to do this while I'm doing it? No, this is a different area of medicine, and you have to be trained. And people need to understand it, but we weren't approaching it that way. So I started Titan really to help be a support agency for RNs, NPs, and PAs, and the practices that hire them. And our tagline, I always joke, we support great injectors in great practices for great patient outcomes, because that's really what it is. This is a medical specialty. And I know you and I talked about this a little bit. You have the industry side. It's one of the few areas of medicine where industry kind of created this specialty. So I think a lot of us have historically said, well, in the aesthetic industry, but you would never say the nephrology industry or the infectious disease industry, but we say aesthetic industry all the time. So I keep joking, I'm trying to make my world smaller. I realize there's only so much I can impact, but I really like to try to say specialty or profession, because this isn't something you can just learn in a weekend class. This isn't something that, it's not doing manicures and pedicures. So, you talk to a lot of people with your clients, and, the biggest issue that everybody is running into right now with looking at the entrepreneurs who are coming into aesthetic medicine is, I'm going to open a medspa. I've got everything ready to go. I need you to find me an injector. Like, no, if you don't have an injector, you don't have a practice. And this, well, it needs to start there.
Well, exactly. And I think when I think of the problem that you're solving, and you're so humble to say you're only a piece of, that equation, certainly we all are, but great movements and entire, changes in, call it industry, start by somebody saying this, I'm recognizing a problem and I'm going to solve this problem here. And I think you and I see it from both angles, that the same problem of trying to help. It's sort of the idea of helping people build great businesses while protecting the integrity of medical aesthetics, right? Of the practice of medicine. And I think both of us we're like, let's link arms and help these business owners. And that's truly I think that the through line of building a great business is having a great team, but also I think not succumbing to, I never really thought of it that way, that it's the industry who started medical aesthetic. I literally have never really heard that before. And I think it's pretty brilliant. And if you think of it that way, it makes sense why we're so conflicted right now. Right. So interesting.
I always joke, I'm not brilliant, I'm just logical, but sometimes logic is a really good thing to have.
It's rare. It's so rare. Yeah. Yeah, no, but I think to put it that way. So, your goal is to be a support agency for RN, MPs, PAs, and practices, which is sort of veering off from that core four, we had talked about before, because that is really where this industry is being, I think, now cultivated and is driving a lot of the consumer demand and responding to it as well.
And literally, Kaylee, you look at the people who are, surgeons didn't go to school to, be injectors. They went to school to be surgeons. And when you look at the majority of the people who do injectables all day long, every day, the majority of them are RNs and Ps or PAs, depending on the state and where they practice. So I think it behooves us, all of us working in the specialty, to really think about who are the people that have that experience and that expertise in a particular area.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, you mentioned just the evolution with dermatology and starting to see private equity come in and the consolidation of practices. I'm curious because it's just such a relevant topic and something that we're all sort of catching on to now and having to navigate. But how do you feel, or how have you seen consolidation with private equity affecting practices that maybe you work with or your everyday aesthetic injector?
that could be a whole topic and get me in trouble 1,000 ways, couldn't it? So,
well, hey, look, there's nobody. I've got a big E on this podcast, so we are unfiltered. So I say, let's go there. Let's go there where other people are afraid to go.
What I try to always stress is that this is medical aesthetics. There has to be a medical, and they are not guests. They are not clients. You are signing HIPAA forms before you treat these patients. They are patients. You are in a medical, facility, and these treatments should be done in a medical facility. And I think anybody who tries to think, oh, it's just a med spa and not a medical practice, we have corporate practice of medicine laws, around the country. And, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. I always have my litany of not an attorney, not a injector, not a physician, but I'm very blessed to have met so many people who are so good in those areas. And what the best of the best realize is that it's medicine. And if we stay there, that's what's going to be important. And what scares me, to be quite honest, Kaylee, because I'll go there when you ask about private equity investment, it's not the investment that is bad. It is the expectation that medical providers are doing these treatments with the expectation that they will have quotas or they will have escalating revenue requirements, and that money will be brought in to meet an investor need, and that will supersede the need for this to be a medical procedure where first do no harm. And that's where my big conflict comes in working with the expansion that comes. And in fact, we're going to contract and really not do much recruiting anymore after like October, because I've just gotten to the point where the phone calls are coming from people who think that this is the same as opening a retail store and not really recognizing that this is a medical practice.
Really?
Yeah. And what we want to do is we want to put our efforts into, we do a lot of work coaching medical professionals who want to transition into aesthetic medicine. Because you think about it, where do you learn about this specialty? You can't go to school and learn it. If you talk to a lot of the nursing programs and say, I want to do aesthetic medicine, nurses have told me the response is, well, that's not real medicine. We don't teach that. And so they end up in, training programs that focus on what to do and not why they're doing it and what the anatomy is behind it and what the critical thinking skills that are necessary. And so with my clinical director, Kevin Harrington.
I'm going to give my next question. Is that why you brought him in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because Kevin has been a faculty trainer for Allergan and Galderma for years. He's a nurse practitioner that owns Spacetime Aesthetics down in Orlando, Florida. And Kevin was one of the original faculty for Chris Surek's Academy for Injection Anatomy Cadaver course. And it was originally a teacher before he went into medicine. And what I love about what Kevin does is he really takes the information from that ground level of, yes, you may be a medical provider, but you aren't trained in this specialty. And we need to retrain you from the beginning with the foundational knowledge of anatomy, of really understanding facial assessment, of understanding product choice, and of understanding those critical thinking skills that help you treat every patient. And, that's where we get into, can you treat? Well, that goes into, can you diagnose? Can you prescribe? Who does the treatment? And, that's where I have a little bit of a fear that because we have so many entrepreneurs who are not medical professionals thinking that this is a lucrative area for them to invest in, that we are going to have a drive for profits that will cause either harm to a patient or will cause concern that will cause legislative reaction. And that, unfortunately, usually just the bad actors, if you say that, don't get shut down. It usually comes in and affects everybody. And so what we're trying to do is say, what does good look like? And that's why with the book, Preparing to be an Aesthetic Injector, I try to give people a really good foundational knowledge of what is the role of an aesthetic injector. What's the history? Who do you work with? What's the continuum of care? What are the requirements that you have to have from a credentialing standpoint? Who do you need to work with? What do you need to learn on your own before you apply for a job? Where might you work? What are these state restrictions? And what's the compensation? Because, bottom line is, yes, it's medicine, but it's cash medicine.
Yeah.
And if you're not bringing in revenue, there's no revenue to pay you as a new injector. So people are not going to just get jobs and make $1 million, which I think they are. It's
no, that's
it takes a long time. Yeah.
That's why I'm here to talk you out of it. But no, I know. No, but you know what I thought was so interesting when we chatted a couple of weeks ago about this is that you really believe that there's a value to mentorship in aesthetics when many injectors come, look for first of all, to the first point of kudos, what does it take to be a great injector? And when we go through formal education, right, my business degree, I had to learn you start undergrad, here are the basics, and then you build on those, on this core foundation. There's no foundation. It's I want to be like her. I want to be a insert Instagram, and by the way, this is not to discredit because I work with many of the big Instagram influencers in our industry who are absolute powerhouses, but they also started somewhere, and so we can't be skipping steps. But also when I appreciated the part of our conversation where you were saying, I think that we need to understand that the mentorship and training, that is your formal education. So there's a value to that. So when a business owner, an entrepreneur I work with, for an example, is putting a compensation plan together, they need to value that training and mentorship and the time that injector is spending with them to come in and build them up. And in which case they're going to be able to hire for potential and not necessarily just for skill, because they're going to be able to invest in them, right?
Well, and Kaylee, you're exactly right. Because what I found is that oftentimes 90% of the people who call and say, I need to hire an injector, will say, I need somebody who has 3 to 5 years of experience and has a book of business they're going to bring to my practice. And forgive my laughing at saying this, but they will say, I want somebody who's really hungry and really driven, and they're really good with Instagram and marketing, and they want to run my practice, and they want to be a great injector. And I'm like, what do you offer them? You don't offer them. They don't need you.
Yeah.
And, that's the person that's going to go start their own practice. So if you are looking to hire an injector, you're going to have a much better chance finding someone who is a great medical clinician, who has the culture and that you want to work with, that type of person and fits the culture of your practice, and someone who has the work ethic and the drive and the interest to learn on their own. And then you bring them into your practice and you let them grow as your aesthetic, non-injectable or injectable side of your practice grows. Because I keep joking, I'm going to write a blog that says, Dear Medspa Entrepreneur, here's why an experienced injector doesn't want to work for you. And I don't mean to be mean, it's just logic. So.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I think the same, we're both, business sort of for business trained, right? And so we like to teach the same hiring philosophies, whether you're hiring in any role in your company, a provider or a practice manager or, anybody, right? Is that to hire to your core values, number one, first and foremost. But I do think, right, the biggest I think it's the elephant in the room fear that everybody really truly has is I need First of all, I'm running a very busy practice. I'm a solopreneur first, right? And then to hire that first injector is very scary because you think you want someone experienced so you can quickly hand off patients and they've got those, the basics down, but then they're not quite the right fit. I'm not sure how much time I have to train them and this whole thing. But then ultimately the biggest fear is that I will train somebody and then they will become really good and develop, build relationships with the clientele within my practice. And then they're just going to go ahead and up and leave and start their own practice. And this happens. It truly does. So like, first of all, is this a legitimate fear in your eyes? And second part of this question is, what's the formula for avoiding this either way?
Here's what I try to help people understand. Everybody in America who does any job started not knowing that job. Yeah. So if you have two options. If you're not going to hire an experienced injector, and I can tell you 100 reasons why that is usually not the best option, because if they're going to leave somebody else and come work for you for more money, they're going to leave you and go work.
Absolutely.
For yep. The second thing is, unless they're in an independent practice state, they don't own patients. So there's a whole ethical thing about having patients follow a provider when they leave a practice and go to another one. But I think what we really have to think about is, what is the communication that is set up when you are looking at bringing somebody into a practice? Mm-hmm. An experienced injector is going to want some sort of revenue or equity, but that new injector wants the chance to start a different career. So what we spend a lot, I said with Titan, we do a lot of coaching with these new injectors. So we give them the book and we say, read this, learn about the specialty. Then we say, do facial anatomy. Make sure that you want to do this because it's hard and there's a lot to learn.
Didn't you say too, I'm sorry to interject, but just because I know you're so good at this, you can keep this in your brain because I'm a terrible interviewer right now, but I'll forget. Didn't you say too that you have your candidates that go through your program pay on their own dime? Like you recommend them to pay, it's a $500 training or something. I can't remember.
It's $1,000 for course number one.
$1,000. And you recommend, look, you should show your future employer that you have skin in the game by investing in this on your own with your own money.
Invest in yourself before you expect someone else to invest in you.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally, Kaylee, that's what we say. We have a injector development program process. We do. Yeah. It literally is. Advertise and say, we're happy to hire naive injectors if you have invested in yourself with something like the Titan Injector Development Program. Do course one, it's $1,000. They get their anatomy, they get the book, they get coaching on what to expect. And we literally tell them, you have to stay someplace 2 to 5 years when you get your first job, because most employers do not even break even on hiring you until the end of that second year. So if somebody's going to hire you, you need to go into this with the mindset that you're going to be there so that they can recoup their investment. And you need to appreciate them for hiring you. But in order for that to happen, it has to be a good conversation first. And you have to make sure it's a good cultural fit and that you guys are in sync. So that's where we then say, okay, after they do course one and pay for it on their own, then interview them at that point. See if you like them. See if their culture, that cultural fit. See if they seem like there's somebody you want to spend all day with every day. See if they have the skills, if they have the mindset, if they're a self-developed learner. Yeah. And then hire them as a 3-month intern. Yeah. We have a thing called the Titan Screening Assessment that we do. I learned years ago, I was very blessed to have people like Dawn Segrillo and Connie Brennan and Claire Fisher and in my territory with Medasis back in 2005, given my age now. And they taught me that there are very specific aptitudes that the best injectors have. But how do you figure out if you have those aptitudes in a candidate before you hire them? And so I spent years looking at these guys and watching what they do. And I created a screening, I hate the word screening, but assessment, conversation outline that allows me to literally sit down with people and find out what are they looking for? What are their innate aptitudes and skills? We have 2 objective, 2 subjective parts. There's a right-left brain quiz. There is a aptitude conversation. There is a picture assessment, and there's a hobby overview. And I can give people a really good way of looking at how is that person going to fit into your practice? What are their skills going to be before you hire them? So, have them pay for the course number 1. have them screen that person. It's $500, so it's a really relatively cheap investment for practice. Then hire them as a 3-month intern. Have them do Titan course number 2, where they learn facial assessment. They understand how does the anatomy relate to what products and treatments you're going to do. What are neurotoxins? How are they all different? Yeah, what are fillers? What are patient adverse events? How do you do the patient journey? And has 20 hours of CME if someone needs it. And when you're done with that, then you can go in and really start learning the hands-on skills. But they pick it up very quickly because they have the critical thinking skills so well developed from the Titan trainers and the information they learn in the webinars we go through with them. And all the Titan trainers are people that have 20 to 30 years of injection experience and have been trainers for usually 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And so we really try to help them understand that this investment that they're putting in themselves is going to pay them back in a career that they love.
Yeah.
And you know what? In that 3 months, if they're not the right person, if they're not working out, you've got them on an internship contract. You just, say it's not going to work. We're done.
Yeah.
But at the end of that 3 months, when they've invested themselves, then you can make them a permanent employee and they've done the work. It's going to be a good thing.
Hey, ambitious aesthetic injector, are you ready to elevate your business to new heights? Great injectors like you are in high demand, but amidst the growth, the challenge is real. Patients want to see you, but how do you scale when they won't leave your side? How do you create a system that allows you to clone your expertise and maintain the quality they expect in your business? Well, introduce the Confidence to Scale program, a transformative 6-week certification designed specifically for in-demand aesthetic and wellness providers like you. This isn't just another course. It's your blueprint to creating a purpose-driven business that not only fills your soul, but elevates your profits. So join us starting the week of September 26th. And by Halloween, you will master the CTS framework, which includes week 1, unlock the success keys to your Confidence to Scale framework. Week 2, unearth your $1 million confidence. Week 3, set boss step boundaries that empower you. Week 4, develop your proprietary method that stands out. Week 5, market your unique disruptive philosophy. And week 6, learn how to clone yourself and scale your systems for maximum impact. Plus, gain exclusive access to 5 group coaching calls live with fellow CTS colleagues and our expert team, plus 2 one-on-one private coaching sessions with our strategic growth advisors. We'll be running 2 cohorts, AM and PM, and we'll have 10 spots only per group. So this will sell out very quickly, Goddess. Stop waiting for opportunity to come knocking. Take the leap and secure your spot in Confidence to Scale today. Transform your passion into scalable success and become the kind of leader who is capable of redefining and realizing her greatest vision. I'll see you there. If I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, then your point, to the fear of them leaving is hire them for the right reasons and make sure you hire the people who are there for the right reasons in the first place. And ultimately what happens from there, you can't, ultimately it's always beyond our control. And I think I just recorded a podcast this week or put it out this week that I was sitting in, meeting after meeting, and I'm hearing all this stuff all the time about employee retention and retention and retention. And then I was like, why don't we normalize actual turnover? Because I think too many times we're trying so hard to keep people and make them happy and overpay them, and they're not the right fit for our company at the end of the day. So let's front load all of that energy, make sure that we hire people who are self-motivated, passionate, driven entrepreneurs who want to invest in themselves, and then give them a really great place to have a runway for growth within our company. And then we've done our job from there. And then if they outgrow us, then we get to say, look at what this, I was able to do for this employee and this runway I was able to give them. And they've invested in my company in this way because we built the infrastructure correctly to make sure that they're generating a profit for us, during the time that they're here. So
I'm sure a lot of what you do with your consulting is working on those communication skills, because what I find so often is, especially with physician-owned practices, they don't have performance evaluation, performance reviews for their injectors or their providers. And usually they don't do that, either because A, they don't know how to do it, or B, they're afraid that provider's going to ask for more money. And most of the time, if you ask the providers, what do you guys want? I want to know I'm doing a good job. I want to know I have value to the practice. I want to know I'm appreciated. Most of the time, they're not going to ask for more money unless their compensation plan is so high. And, and that does happen, that's for sure. But if you tell them up front, here's what our performance review process looks like. This year, this is what we're going to expect of you. If you do this, here's what you get. If you exceed that, and this is what you do extra, we can add this to what you're going to receive. So there's none of this, oh my gosh, we're all getting blindsided. There's none of this going in at the end of the year and saying, look, you need to give me more money or else I'm leaving. It's all set up front, and it's correct communication.
Well, and not to mention, we've done surveys of hundreds of employees, and by far and large, the biggest motivator for the reason people work for companies, there's all kinds of different love languages, and certain things that kind of get them excited. But the best way, I'd say like, employees want to be recognized, and I think we instantly go to the compensation piece. I don't know why it is that way. I think it's the only way to recognize that and to show, but we really, I think we over prioritize.
People are afraid of.
Yeah.
Some people always make that the biggest bubble because it's
right.
Afraid of.
Right.
And sometimes they also don't know how to ask.
Well, and also back to the other piece that we talked about is hiring people for experience versus their skill and their potential for growth and the alignment with your values. Because if you hire for those things, regardless of their experience, like when you hire experience, sometimes you're also hiring bad experience. You're hiring all of it. So no offense to the experienced people, but I think when you do that, then you say, well, the more experience, the more I have to pay. And that's why we instantly go there. Like, can I afford that? So yeah, I think it's just a different perspective shift around great people are more whole human than I think we sometimes give them credit for, right? So we need to allow ourselves to align with and make the process of hiring people not a transaction, but a communicative relationship, really.
Well, and that's why we do our screening.
Yeah.
And Kaylee, it's crazy because it's weird. I've had more screening requests this week than I've had in 2 months. And
I need help. Do you have room for a couple of mine?
Sure.
I'm kidding, but not.
They're literally just, it's almost always the either injector owners that will ask, because they're the ones who understand the risk, but they're also the ones who understand that we're talking about RNs and Ps and PAs in many cases here. And one of the things I've learned doing these screenings over the last 8 years is that almost every single person that goes into nursing goes in for 2 things. One reason that they understand and they relate to, and one that they don't even realize they need. Number one, they want to help others. They want to be a good caretaker. And that is just inherent in why they go into nursing. And if it's a physician or a business person, that is usually not inherent in their internal makeup. And so they don't understand that that is something that's so important to a nurse. The second thing that nurses tend to have inherently is the need to be valued or appreciated. And the amount of times I hear a nurse just say, if someone would just tell me thank you.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Now, PAs, whole different ballgame. They're trained differently. They usually come into the specialty differently, and they have an entirely different. So that's why I tell a lot of practice owners and physicians that, you know what, let me screen these people and let me give you insights into what motivates each one of these prospective employees, so that right from the beginning, you understand how to get the best out of them and what they're looking for to have a really good employment opportunity with you.
Yeah.
You don't want to find out after the fact. You want to know up front.
No, totally. Well, that is leadership in essence to me, is inspiring people to do to accomplish your goals for their own reasons, essentially. right? So like this is the vision for the company, but like they're showing up for their own reason every day. Like, so how do we align those things? And I think it starts by really knowing that person as a human being. So I think that's really important.
Well, so everybody listening, this is where we can help you. I'll help screen the people, find the right people, get the right people in your practice, and then Kaylee will really help you understand how to help them align with those business goals. So we keep them there forever. No. Retention is such an important thing.
No, it really is. But it's not a reflection, it's not a reflection on you as a leader. If you've done your homework up front and you followed this process, you weed out, like our hiring process is, as an example that we teach in our academy, it's, 10 steps happen before you're even on the phone with an employee. And so, it's like, well, but they didn't make the video. If you need somebody who can follow directions, upload the video to YouTube, you're going to want them on camera, then they're telling you that they're not, ambitious or resourceful enough.
Their skill set.
It's, and so let's move along, and I think there's just so much that we underestimate. So which is why you're so needed. Okay. So
yes. No, I was going to say the technology piece. Oh my gosh. You talk about other things that has changed, but yeah that's a whole nother. There's still so many nurses and so many amazing injectors. They will do anything you ask them to do. But if you say, make a video and send me a video. Yeah. Done. No.
Yeah. But then there'll be an expectation that they be on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
But you know what? Do they have to be on? If they're a great injector, should that be an expectation?
This is an interesting. Well, this is also. I wonder what your thoughts are about this, because I have my own opinion. Do you think that great injector? What's your opinion about sales training and the responsibility of selling on an injector in a practice?
Okay, I'm going to be really blunt on this.
Please
One
do.
of the questions we ask in the aesthetic screening is, in aesthetic medicine, it's cash. And one of the hardest things is you have to ask a patient to pay you. You have to ask them for money before you can treat them and meet their need. So talk to me about your experience with selling and with educating. Mm-hmm. Because many, many, many healthcare providers will say, look at how many surgeons don't do the numbers themselves. They hire a patient coordinator to do it. Mm-hmm. It is not an inherent skill for the majority of medical providers, or they would have gone to business school. Mm-hmm. But what I tell them that makes it easier is, you don't have to sell, but they have to buy. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge difference in their mind. Because most of the time, if you think about teaching or educating, it really is selling. Mm-hmm. The only difference is at the end of the conversation, you're not saying, so can I count on you to buy 10 of these this month so that you can help me make my quota? And what you say is, does this sound
You said that so naturally.
I might have, I will tell you, I have never said that.
Chasing down the doctor in the hallway with a sales aide.
Yeah. But I will tell people a lot, this isn't about asking them to buy something. You're not selling to them. You're basically, it is about asking them to say, I want that. And you have shown me that this has value in meeting the expectation or the need that I have. Yeah. And that's a complete, it's the same thing when you're trying to get somebody to take a blood pressure medicine. They're not buying the blood pressure medicine, per se, but they still have to buy in that it's important, that it's necessary, and that it's going to meet the need they have to be healthier. And so we can.
Doesn't this go back to understanding what motivates people and being able to communicate?
Yeah. Kaylee, I don't care what anybody says about how much you have to be good at medicine. I tell all of my candidates, there are 3 things you have to be good at to be a great aesthetic provider. Number 1, you have to be smart. There is so much information that you're going to have to learn and absorb and pull out for appropriate patients. You can't be, you have to be very bright to do well in aesthetic medicine.
Yeah, and have a desire to continue to learn, like a growth mindset for sure. If
you got to learn a lot of anatomy, that's just not. People tell me all the time, I had no idea there was this much I had to learn.
No, this is why I sit behind a computer all day.
Yeah. But number 2 is you have to have great hands. You have to have procedural skill. You have to have those fine motor skills. But the third thing is you have to have an eye. And the eye is not just of seeing what needs to be done, but it's seen in a way that you can communicate that to a patient so that what they're asking for and what you see as a possibility for a treatment meet.
Yes.
And you both can achieve the same thing. And
well, this is my, I think there's an overemphasis on trying to make injector salespeople and not teaching the critical communication skills and the framing of how we are helping our clients solve a problem, and they're coming to us for that reason. And so that whole serving piece, and education first, and being really confident in your ability to communicate, and the passion piece, that'll get you really far. Because I look at the injector owners we work with, PAs, NPs, and MD. I mean, we have all specialties. They didn't sit in business school and learn sales skills, but guess what? They built most of them $1 million plus businesses with passion and with the things that you just mentioned.
But also, nobody's going to build and maintain $1 million plus business without great results.
Yep.
And I have to say, so forgive me, all the marketing companies out there. I am still adamant that every single person that runs a practice, the majority of your patients are going to come because a patient sat in your chair, loved the experience, loved the outcome, and they told somebody else to come see you.
Yeah. As long as that wonky lady doesn't cut him off in the middle of the cocktail hour and tell him they shouldn't do that. So I told you we have to find her. Okay. I want to quickly shift gears because this is it's a hot topic. And you're just, Allergan and the Allergan space, and the injector world. And I just feel like you're a perfect person to just give me some of your own personal opinions and insights from the clients you work with. What is your take on this whole, and I know we're in the midst of it and things could be changing, but I need to know from you, Mary Beth, what is your take on the whole Allie update, uproar, wait for 9:30, this whole situation? Where do you stand on that?
I am fascinated that so many people who don't work for Allergan feel the need to weigh in on this change for a vendor. I have never seen this in anything else out there in the market. And so I think it shows us two things. Number one, how valuable and how important Allie has been in identifying patient opportunity and patient information. I want to, yes, I worked for Allergan for 10 years. It was brilliant distinctions when I was there. I'm not as up to date on the Allie changes. I honestly haven't even seen a recap of all the changes. So please, the only thing that I have seen a lot of people get excited about is, well, then we have to give them a free syringe. And my giggle with all of this is, you guys, 20 years ago, when I started at Medasis, we had something called the Restylane Rewards Program. And it literally was, you come in, you get treated once, and we give you $100. You get treated a second time, you get $150. You get treated a third time. I think it went up to $250. And then on the fifth treatment, you get a free syringe. And you inject the syringe, and then you send the note into Galderma Medasis back then, and then they replace the syringe. And yes, at that point, they even were giving away their time to inject that free syringe. And, when I was Botox product manager, one of the things that we worked with very closely was how to make sure that Botox samples were used appropriately, because you can't sell them. They're not free goods. There are very specific PDMA laws around the use of pharmaceutical samples. And, people would get all excited about, oh, here's a program where, a patient gets 20 free units with the nitrile gel trial program. And I'm like, you can charge an injection fee. I mean, the thing we have to realize is there are three things in here. There is a product, there is promotional opportunities to support that product and get patients in the door, and then there is the skill of the injector. If anybody is choosing where they go because of a particular product or because of a promotion, they're probably going to be like that 20% that I talked to before, where they're going to leave because they're not going to have the experience or the skill from the injector. So I think what everybody needs to realize, whether it's Aspire, whether it's Allie, whether it's anything else that happens out there, people are going to come to your practice because of the experience they have, the skill you offer as a medical provider, and because of the outcome they receive. And this other stuff only becomes noise if those first things aren't met and addressed. I'm so
yeah.
sorry.
No. I think ultimately that's the answer for sure. Like we can't rely on industry, going back to industry to call the shots for us in our practice, right? But I think the issue is that the perceived change, right? And I think one of the issues is that you haven't seen no one's seen a bulleted. It's all questionable. It's all like, well, are we really understanding this?
I'm so excited when the details aren't out there.
No, but what's known is that they're going to be choosing which product they provide the freebie of. So this why I thought that this might get you a little riled up because of your intimacy with, wanting to protect the integrity of medical aesthetics. And this is walking a fine line to read, commoditizing retail medicine.
It should always be the providers.
You get a free vial of, walk in and ask your provider for it, whether they carry that or not. And there's a monetary value to that they're seeing. And so there's providers who are upset. And this is the only reason why I'm even involved in this, because my Instagram's blowing up with questions, is that how do we handle it? And how does a company who has BDMs and APCs marching in our practice to talk about areas and, trying to decommoditize this conversation, and protect the integrity of aesthetic medicine, now direct promoting a product that, the word on the street is filler sales are down. And now how do we, and so this is the conversation. So I'm just being, playing the devil's advocate here, that it does walk a fine line, that now it's a conversation practices have to have when their patient is walking in and saying, can I have, I earned a specific, this one specific product or one syringe of this or that or whatever. And now we've never talked about syringes in my practice and I have to explain. So, but again, to your point, a call to action for providers to really think about, like, whose business are you running here, and how do you want to, it's going to be an elevated conversation that a practitioner is going to need to have with a patient. And I think it's affecting practices across the board, from ones that are starting out to ones that are, diamond level, and then the tiers and all of that. So,
well, and I've never been a big fan of gamification.
Yeah.
God bless you, Tom Powell, if you're listening to this, but I will never forget him coming back one day and saying, people have no idea what they're paying. And I'm like, well, yeah, Allergan makes it so unbelievably confusing. I have to admit, that was one nice thing about working with Botox Cosmetic. It's relatively pretty clear just because of the average selling price issues and things that we have with the reimbursement, on the therapeutic side. But, what I guess, all of that stuff is noise that if you're talking about it with everybody else, instead of just saying, Allergan, here's a question I have. Let me know when you have an answer for me. You're probably feeding into spending time on something that is not supporting your patient needs. And, if they're an alley practice and they've always gotten Juvederm and they've never tried Volbella, and they say, hey, you've got a free syringe of Volbella, there's still probably an Allergan account. And okay, maybe you try a syringe of Volbella, or else you say, you know what? I appreciate you coming in and asking for that. Let me explain to you why I've chosen not to use that product in my practice. And here's what I use instead to achieve the results that I think most people want from that product. And you know what? Let me work with you to just go back to the treatment plan that we've set for you with what your expectations and your needs are for loving what you see when you look in the mirror. And let's keep that the focus, not a coupon that you got in the mail. Because you think about how many coupons you get for free stuff, for everything. Everybody I talk to and I say, how many unread emails do you have in your inbox? And, the average answer is, probably 2,000 to 3,000. Which cracks me up. My first thing is, seriously, you don't know how to set up a junk email account? Set up a junk email account and get all that stuff into that and give everybody an email that you're actually going to look at and see the emails in it. But, we have to be able to say, we're adults. And if you're running a business, you control the business, not a vendor. And the whole point is, what is the right product that's going to give the results and the outcomes that's going to make that patient come back and tell others that you're a great provider?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So interesting. So we've sort of,
I'm sorry, I don't have more of a controversial answer on that.
Oh, no. I was just curious as, from another industry colleague, like, medical aesthetics colleague. I'm trying to take industry out of my, vernacular. So what, just sort of recapping, this walk down memory lane, future, like, where we've been, what's happening in the industry now, the incredible movement that you're creating, Mary Beth, and, inspiring me here, helping to solve that problem of being that ally to aesthetic practitioners, NPs, RNs, MPs, PAs, helping them find that pathway to becoming a great injector, and then aligning great injectors with practices and or helping them, launch on their own from there. What are your predictions for our industry over the next 5 years?
The industry side of things, I predict we're going to continue to see more products. The Hugel products are coming for neurotoxins with Lativo. You're going to see Novastique bring the chroma fillers to market. You're going to continue to see more fillers, more products. You're going to see things that target elastin. You're going to see things that are targeting skin health and skin quality. So we're going to see more and more and more products come to market. And I think industry is going to feel more and more pressure to get not only share of voice, but share of wallet from both provider and practices and from consumers. I think from the specialty side of things, we're going to probably go through a couple of years where we have a lot of medical providers coming into aesthetic medicine that are not well trained. And then I think something is going to happen. We're going to have some sort of tsunami, and we're going to see things kind of contract or retract or separate. Mm-hmm. I think if the investment continues in aesthetic medicine, my bet is that because of the skill and the time to develop a really strong injector, you may see more of those investment-backed practices become more health, wellness. Maybe they're going to do more hormones, more weight loss, more, diet, wellness, PRP, PRF type of things. And that you may then see aesthetic medicine from the injectable side kind of contract a little and come back into more of its separated specialty. And maybe I'm just being hopeful with that, but I don't think, my joke with everybody, I keep joking, I'm going to trademark this, but I'm very fond of telling everybody, toxins are math class. As long as you get the right amount of product in the right muscle, it's going to pretty much work almost every single time. But fillers, that's art class. And everybody has a different expectation. They have a different goal of what they want to achieve with the treatment, of what they want the look to be, whether it's restoring lost volume, whether it's changing a natural shape or contour of something. And I think the skill that is required, I think a lot of the companies, you talked about them being concerned about fillers. It's not that people are using fewer fillers. We've had kind of a tsunami of three things. Number one, post-COVID, we did this. Where do I get my... We had a nice growth, and then we went down, and then we went straight up, and then we had another good year, and now we're leveling back off.
It's stabilizing.
And I think if people go back to 17, 18, all the way up through 24, my gut, what I see is that trend line is still very, very, very smooth. They just get out those ups and downs from COVID and post-COVID. The other thing we're seeing is, so we're seeing good growth. It's just that, I'm sorry, the more filler you put in people, the more they don't need more filler. So everybody's not going to need 6 to 8 syringes because they've got such a lovely foundation already. So we have to understand that account that is your really big
logical again.
Yeah, again, it's logical, right? But the other thing is that PRP and PRF, are being used in some places where people try to use fillers that maybe they weren't the most appropriate option. And the third thing is threads. And, I have no skin in the game on threads. There's some things I think they're amazing. Some I think, oh my gosh, I get a little bit concerned. I'm a big fan of having things FDA cleared or FDA approved. Let's make sure the research is behind them. Where I get really nervous right now is the number of companies that are selling exosomes or growth factors that don't have the science or the research behind it, like something like, an REScence with PDGF. Have no skin in the game with that company, but You've got really good science behind it. You've got a Rion that has really good Mayo-backed science behind it, the plated products and their exosome products. And then you've got a lot of other people that are encouraging a lot of unsubstantiated off-label uses for some of these products. And that's where I think we're going to get in trouble with some of this. So, if you're a medical provider or a practice owner listening to this, I would say, do your research and make sure that everything is scientifically backed. Everything has to start with, make sure that everything you offer is grounded in science.
Mm-hmm.
Then you want to look and make sure that your staff understands and believes in these products and that they have the tools to educate well and to support patients in their practice. And then that third part should only be, what are the patient promotions and what are you using to do pull-through of that product? Because if you start with the promotion and the pull-through and, I'm going to buy this because here's a deal or it's cheap or I got a special at this meeting, that doesn't start with the science. It's going to give patients that stuff. So
I couldn't agree more. I think I'm seeing the same trends on the business side, obviously. And I think it's the same philosophy. It's like start inside and then go out, work out, it's really about catering to your most valuable customer and doubling down on them because they're going to be the catalyst for growth for you ultimately.
If you throw, paint at the wall, you're never going to become an expert in anything.
Yeah.
I know you probably know this story, and it's one that I love to tell my clients, is the story of the jam. Which there was a company, very quickly, they had, 3 types of jam. They took to a grocery store, they let people sample the jam. People loved the jam, they bought a ton of jam. They went, wow, this is great. We have this great product, people love it. We've got 20 different flavors of jam. Let's take 20 different flavors the next time. We're going to sell 20 times as much. They take the 20 flavors in, everybody tries them. Everybody's like, this is great jam. They only sold half as much because they had so many options that people couldn't make a buying decision.
That's overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens if companies have too many products and try to sell too much at once. I think that is what happens with practices where they have so many options. In a practice, they should not be selling anything. They should be simply saying, patient, why are you here? What need do you have that I can help address? And let's talk about that first. English Black is a fantastic PA down in Greensboro, North Carolina.
She's a client of ours.
She is a client of yours. And she just did a lovely talk on patient treatment plans last night for the Titan membership webinar. And what she said was, you are not basically selling them products or services. You're helping them create a treatment plan for the results they want to achieve. And that's what we have to continue. So when you asked about quotas or how much you have to sell, this is medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be, here's a quota or here's how much you have to sell. It should be, who are the patients that are walking in the door and what is the medical need that we're meeting for them today?
Mm-hmm. The sales will come when you mm-hmm. have the right approach and the right kind of results.
And we've all been in sales for years. We understand sales quotas never go down, but I do worry a little bit if we have practices that literally are set up based on nothing other than sales quotas.
Yeah.
I hope we stay with communication and great education for both patients and for the providers in the practice, that we have practices that are great community supporters, that they give back in their communities. If I am talking to someone and they tell me, oh, Mary Beth, you were the Botox product manager, where should I go to get treated? I will always say, number one, when you're calling, ask your friends, where they go. If you have a friend that looks good, they may or might not have told you they get treated, but if they look great for their age, there's a good chance that they will share their secret with you. Number two, when you're researching that practice, then look at the credentials. How long have they been doing? Not how long have they been a provider, but how long have they been doing injections or the service that you're looking at? Mm-hmm. And what do they do for their ongoing training? How do they continue to stay up to? When you're talking to the provider, trying to decide, is this the right provider for me? It sounds like you do a great job when you're treating patients. What I'd really like you to tell me about is, what happens when something goes wrong? Ooh. Tell me about some adverse events you've had and how you handle those. And who do you refer out to if something really does happen? And if they tell you, oh my gosh, we have great patients, nothing ever goes wrong, these are so safe, run, go find another practice, because your best injectors will all tell you it's not a matter of, is it going to happen? It's a matter of when, and they're prepared. And then the fourth thing you say is, okay, if I get treated once, what happens if I want to come back? And find out what is the continuum of care that they're going to offer within the practice. Who else is going to be there? How long have the providers been in? Do they have an esthetician? Do they have a laser specialist? Do they have a physician that they routinely refer to for other services that maybe they can't provide? Because this is a very collegial specialty. And, there are some great providers who are single provider practices by themselves. But even in that case, I would expect them to have a network that they refer to, they work with for that total. Because I don't care if you come in from surgery or dermatology, if laser treatment, skin care, injectables. Once you're in that continuum, those are all going to be things that help you keep your skin health as you invest in.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for that. Okay, so how can people find you and work with you and Titan and take advantage of all of your brilliance and logic?
Thanks, Kaylee. The website is www.titanesthetic.com. The three things we really specialize in going forward, we're making a few changes in October, and we're going to really drop the recruiting and really focus on the education and coaching for injectors coming into the market, and then looking at networking and mentoring for existing injectors. So the Instagram site is Titan_aesthetic_recruiting. Website at www.titanesthetic.com. Facebook, Titan. I don't even know. Titan Aesthetic. Just Google Mary Beth Hagen and you'll get way too much of me.
I do that too. I'm like, there's 35 places, but like, I feel like I'm everywhere. And then people tell me, but no one can spell your name. And then I get mad. This is
Hagen, Hagen, just like Häagen-Dazs ice cream. I married a good Norwegian farm voice.
I love that. Well, thank you. This has been such a fun conversation, and I'm just so I'm happy and honored to have you as a friend and colleague in this industry, and to have this conversation and to share your knowledge with all of our listeners here on the Fierce Factor. So I really appreciate you, and I look forward to working with you ongoing in the future.
Same here, Kaylee. Thank you so much for having me. And I wish all of your clients great success in the coming year.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Listen, leader, if you're vibing with me here, hang tight, because I have a brand new resource for you. You are a successful, confident, powerful woman who just isn't into being average. No, you have a calling, and part of that calling is requiring you to level up. And I know that if you're working across the next $1 million milestone in your business, you need to be in the right circles. And perhaps that's why you found us. I'd love to invite you to join The Blueprint, a weekly resource for inspired, provocative thinkers who are taking this conversation to the next level. Get access to free business tools, podcast supplements, guideposts, and direct communication with me and my expert team. And of course, a masterfully curated circle of women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to klcconsultants.com/blueprint. It's time to elevate. See you there, goddess.